The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening and welcome to the October 2013 Polyphonic on Campus webinar. This is Steve Danu from polyphonic.org, and we're very glad that you are joining us with others from around the country for our second in a series of 3 webinars this fall. Tonight we're really excited to have 3 engaging panelists with us, Jennifer Snodgrass, Matthew Artizone, and Zach Prusel. And they will be discussing the topic you should see on your screen, Applying to Grad School for Music, an Inside Look. Just a couple of logistics before we begin tonight's presentation. Your phone or computer audio is muted by default, and that's just really to cut down on background noise. We absolutely encourage you to ask questions, and we hope that you do. And you can do that by typing in a question to the question box, which is on your webinar control panel. You should see a little questions with a plus next to it. You can just expand that, write a question in there, and click submit. And you can really ask a question through that question box at any point during the presentation, but we'll hold them until the end. So feel free to write something in at any time, and we should have plenty of time at the end to get to all of the questions. Like I said, we're very excited to have 3 wonderful speakers with us today. We'll each be sharing their own unique perspectives on this topic, and what I'm going to do is to introduce each of them before they give us their thoughts on this topic. So we're going to start tonight with Dr. Jennifer Snodgrass, who is an Associate Professor of Music and Director of the Graduate Studies at the Hayes School of Music at Appalachian State University. Dr. Snodgrass's latest textbook, Contemporary Musicianship, Analysis and the Artist, will be published by Oxford University Press in 2014. And she was recently appointed to the editorial board for the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy, is president of the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the College Music Society, and co-chair of the newly launched Music Theory Pedagogy Online. So Jennifer, great to have you with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here tonight to talk to everyone about my experiences both as a graduate director and as being a mentor to several undergraduates here in the Hayes School of Music at Appalachian State. I want to talk to you about choosing a school in which the master's degree is the terminal degree. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the pros and the cons of that. As you're doing your search right now for finding the correct program that works best for you, you'll notice that some of the different universities have the PhD and the DMA, while others focus just on the master's programs. Some of the advantages are that the masters have typically less graduate students in the program. I'll just talk about ASU for a second. We have 45 students in our graduate program by choice. We have 450 undergrads, and we try to keep our graduate program at 10% because we want our graduate students to have immediate access to those mentor relationships to where they're engaging in research and performance with our faculty on a daily basis. Another advantage is that all of the assistantships that are made available are given to master's students. Here at ASU, every single graduate student that we have actually is assigned an assistantship, whether that be in performance or research. When you arrive as a master's student, one of these master's terminal types of universities, your opportunities in research and teaching are pretty much immediate. You'll notice that with your teaching assistantships, most of the time you're given either your own class, if you come in prepared to do that, or you're assisting a professor from day one. The cons to all this, coming to a master's program only, is there's less resources in terms of the library. The library collections tend to be smaller. Some of the performing opportunities also seem to be less in that, say for instance, schools with a DMA might have several operas a year, and we have more like 2, a full-fledged opera and an opera scenes program. Many programs with doctoral degrees provide a lot more grants and fellowships. Most of our funding is all in the terms of assistantships, very little in terms of fellowships. And location can be limiting. I know that if you've ever been to Boone, North Carolina, we're on top of a mountain, And sometimes that can be wonderful because you are stuck on top of a mountain and you can practice, 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 but it does take some effort to get away from the small town. So that needs to be all part of your decisions as you're making these plans. So I want to talk a little bit about what you need to be doing in your terminal year, whether that is as an undergraduate, if you're a senior right now, or if you're a master's student in your second year applying to doctoral programs. I'm going to give you just some and what you can do to prepare yourself. One of the first things I tell my students is to attend at least one regional or national conference. And I put some up there, but there are plenty of others. The College Music Society, if you're not familiar with that, that includes performers, composers, music theorists, historians from all aspects of the field, and the others that are listed. All of those societies that are listed there have a national conference and a regional conference. So I would encourage you to look that up. If you are a senior, I would highly, highly encourage you to become active with your Office of Student Research. Most campuses have these, and you can go and talk to them about a research project. Now, this includes lecture recitals. So when you see the word research, the office will also include the word creative activity, and that includes compositions if you're a composer, or lecture recitals if you're a performer. In CURP, you can see the National Conference for Undergraduate Research is where I encourage students to take their materials or their lecture recital. It's a conference of about 3,000 undergraduates from all across the United States. Yes, the sciences are very, very well represented there, but music is becoming more and more prevalent at that conference. If you have the opportunity and are excited about this kind of thing, publish as an undergraduate. I never was encouraged to publish until I was in graduate school, but there are online journals that are completely blind. I put a few up there if you're interested in music theory, like the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy Online. We're really looking for people that are out in the field, out doing things. If you even had a type of idea of teaching from a graduate perspective, these online journals are looking for things of that nature. Magazines, if you're a string player, trying to publish just some pedagogy or some analysis of a piece you're playing in some of the regional magazines would definitely count. In NCUR, again, the Conference on Undergraduate Research, they have their own journal. Okay, just a few other things. As I look through applications, that's one of my main jobs here as the graduate director is I read through the reference letters before they actually go out to the applied professors. So if you're applying for one of our viola assistantships and admission into that program, I would be the first person to receive that reference letter. And I cannot tell you how many people do not follow the rules that are presented here. Choose faculty or other experts in the field who know your skills well. It's not appropriate to ask a friend or a family member or your preacher or a teacher you had, an English teacher in high school, to write your recommendation letter at this point. It needs to be somebody in the field. When you send your letters to your references, provide a CV or a resume for them. Sometimes you think your professor or your faculty member may know exactly what you've been doing your 4 years of college, but that's not always the case. So when you ask them for a letter, be sure to provide that. And let your references know your career goals. I know I've had students come to me and ask for a letter, and I've started the letter thinking they wanted to go be a band director, and then I learned that they're applying for musicology. So you need to be sure that your references know specifically what you're going to do in your career. And waive your right to see the letter. I've had a lot of students ask me that. Should I waive my right? Yes. It shows that you trust your references and that you believe that they are going to represent you in the best light. And also give your references plenty of time. It's not appropriate to ask them 3 days beforehand. If you want a good reference, they will actually take the time to really write a personal letter about your skills and your abilities while you've worked underneath them. So it takes some time to put those thoughts onto paper. Okay, a lot of students come and talk to me about a personal statement, and many of those that I edit for my own students or see come through my desk on applications, it's just a rehash of their CV. It's nothing interesting. It's not personal at all. It's just listing the facts. Well, we can tell the facts from your CV. We don't need to see that all rehashed. So a personal statement is basically a couple of paragraphs, maybe 2 pages, it depends on the school, the word count, that highlights your personality, your interests, your accomplishments, and goals. Pick the top things from your CV that you want to highlight, but also talk about personal moments and things that led you into music. I can own background. I was an opera singer. I was planning to have a huge opera career. I got blisters on my cords as a senior in high school, a senior in college. And so my life changed to music theory, and I'm grateful for it. And I believe that that all needed to go in my personal statement so that my graduate schools would understand why I made that switch from voice to music theory. You're just more than a GPA and an audition. I know we put so much emphasis on that, and here at ASU we put a lot of emphasis on GRE scores, but we want to see that you're human. We want you to humanize your application through this personal statement. Let us know what makes you tick. And make it stand out. Use really strong verbs with personal experiences, imagery, things that mattered in your life. What got you to this point? What were your triumphs? But again, don't reiterate everything that you put on your CV. Take some time with your personal statement and make sure that you have several people read, and proofread. And lastly, I just want to show just a few helpful links that could be of great assistance as you're in the final process. I know many of the applications are due in the next month and a half. The College Music Society Mentoring Program will pair you with a mentor in your field of study, somebody that's not on your university. I know I'm mentoring a piano graduate student right now on a research project. So I would encourage you, if you would like to have a mentor and like to have that one-on-one interaction, to just send an email to that address, and they will be glad to pair you up with somebody that would help to read through your CV, your letters of recommendations, who you've picked, things of that nature. Another site, this is very general though, is choosing a graduate program at gradschools.com. One of the great things about this is there's lists within this website that talk about how to choose a grad school. You know, location does matter, faculty matters. If you're interested in funding, that matters. It'll actually go through the list for you. And some of the things I've talked about with writing a personal statement and what works and what doesn't work are listed there at that link. I hope you're able to copy that down because it will give you lots of feedback on what different types of committees are looking for at this point.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. It's really fantastic advice and perspectives for us. And if you have questions for Jennifer, feel free to write them in, and we'll, like I said, get to those at the end. I want to turn now to our next presenter, Zach Prusel, who is a master's degree candidate in cello performance and literature at the Eastern School of Music. Zach received his BM with honors from the New England Conservatory of Music in May 2012. And he's also an active teacher in the Rochester area, holding a teaching assistantship at Eastman and serving on the faculty of the Connect School of Music in Brighton. And we thought Zach would be a great person to have here to discuss his recent experience with this, being a master's student right now. So, Zach, welcome, and we turn to you.
Thank you, Steve. Excited to be here. And as Steve was saying, everyone, I endured the process a couple years ago. And so my portion of this evening's presentation is to basically just sort of go through the application year and give some advice from my experience on how to best handle the various aspects of the process. So getting started, you want to start early. So this may seem obvious, but you would be surprised how many people wait until they're munching on Thanksgiving leftovers before finally cracking open the computer and opening an application. So it's still technically early now because we're only at the end of October. So you still got time. But don't wait too much longer if you haven't gotten anything yet, because those deadlines will come out faster than you think. Similarly, make sure that you ask professors for recommendations well in advance of their deadlines. You don't want to be knocking on their office door on November 28th when they're in the midst of grading a myriad of term papers, because not only will that put more stress on the both of you, it might not exactly encourage the professor to write the most glowing recommendation ever. So keep that in mind. Double check your instrument's pre-screening requirements, if applicable, and prepare accordingly. Again, you don't want to realize at 10 p.m. on November 30th that you needed another movement of Bach and have to go and record it in your living room, right? So make sure you read the fine print and get everything together well in advance. Next, 5 is the magic number. So when you apply to undergrad, you might have had a large list of schools, which is advisable as a lot of undergrads are unsure as to where they really have a good chance and what type of environment is right for them. But however, now that you've been in school for 4 years, you've probably developed a clear idea of what facet of the field you're interested in pursuing, and so you can narrow down your choices a bit. Personally, I would recommend between 3 and 5 schools because, as you probably recall from undergrad, the audition cycle in the winter can get pretty hectic if you have like 10 places to be at in the same weekend. And then, of course, like a snowstorm hits or something and you'll really be in trouble. But we'll talk about that in the planes, trains, and automobiles section that's coming up. So. Next slide. It's deciding on a school. How should you choose which institutions make the final cut on your list? Well, first of all, I strongly believe that the prospective studio teacher is the absolute most important thing to consider for performance majors. You're going to be entrusting this individual with your instrumental progress over the next 2 years, and it could very well be your last chance to take lessons on a regular basis. So it's not something you want to leave up to chance. And actually, I just wrote a blog about this as part of my Music School Mythbusters series, so if you got some time after the webinar, don't hesitate to navigate over to polyphonic.org on campus and check it out. So that's my shameless self-promotion moment of the night. Yeah, so location is similarly significant. You have to consider where you might want to live and gig in the city after graduation because it's very common for grad students to take local jobs, establishing a teaching studio in whatever city or town they land in. And so bear in mind, it might not just be a 2-year stint. And finally, you definitely want to consider what aspects of the field are emphasized at the school you're looking at. Is it exclusively performance-based? Does it have a great education department? Is there a program for arts leadership and administration? For me, part of the reason I was drawn to Eastman was because of its ALP program. And it's something I was really interested in. I came here and I met with some of the directors. I'm privileged to be a candidate now for the certificate. It's been a fantastic experience. So that was certainly an important factor in my decision to apply and subsequently attend Eastman. Benefits of visiting schools. There are lots. The most important, of course, is the possibility of meeting and or taking a lesson with a prospective teacher, which we'll talk about more in a second. Also, you can tour campus, again, deciding whether this is somewhere you would actually like to live, ask questions of current students and faculty, and get a sense of the local environment, too. When I was applying 2 years ago, for example, I came to Eastman, and I had a lesson with David Ying, who's now my teacher, and he's been awesome. And I also met with Matthew, who we'll hear from shortly, which was extremely beneficial and was a really useful contact to have made later on in the process when I was making my decisions. The trial lesson. So first of all, I want to emphasize that it's very common to do this. Don't feel like you're being too assertive or anything if you're asking a professor to meet with you, because mostly everybody does it. After all, this is for you too. It's a good chance to get a feel for how the teacher works and what sorts of things they might be focusing on with you. But at the same time, pick someone you can actually see yourself study with. Don't just go for the big names because they're the guys you hear about. I did my undergrad at AC, and every violinist and their mother practically wanted to study with Don Wallerstein, but he took like 2 people every year, so the other 400 had to figure out something else. Having lessons with a few different faculty members is totally fine too. They understand that you're experimenting with different situations, and you shouldn't feel as though you're stepping on someone's toes if you leave their studio and go right next door for the next trial lesson. Well, maybe allow an hour in between to take it easy or something. But the point is, the teachers aren't going to be mad if you do that. Obviously, you should strive to be well prepared and present yourself professionally, so don't go in with the movement of your concerto that you've only practiced since last week while wearing some flannel pajama pants, okay? That actually really does say a lot, so use common sense. And also, it might seem like a relatively minor detail, but make sure you and the professor have an understanding about the payment situation, because you don't want to be heading out the door and having hotshot teacher A suddenly accost you for $200 when all you've got in your wallet is the $2 your mom gave you for the train ride back to the hotel. So make sure that's all clear in advance. All right, so audition day, the D-day of the process, if you will. The best thing you can do to ensure success is to make sure that all of the logistical things are taken care of. So plan an adequate amount of travel time. 6 a.m. flight plus 12 noon audition equals probably not best plane ever. Again, dress professionally. 6 a.m. flight plus 12 noon audition plus ripped jeans and Packers jersey equals not very good first impression either, right? Of course, ensure an adequate amount of warm-up time. Get to the school 10 minutes before the audition after having driven through the annual Snowmageddon that seems to hit the Northeast without fail every February, right during the audition season. And above all, remember that the panel wants you to do well. At this point, I personally had the experience of sitting on the other side of audition panels for some secondary students and stuff, and I can tell you, nobody wants to see you fail epically. They're not sitting there just waiting for you to miss a big shift or something, and keeping that in mind can definitely help reframe the situation from facing the firing squad to sharing your music with people who want to see you succeed. A little mental shift can do wonders, believe me. All right, so you finish your auditions, catch up on all the schoolwork you've missed, and it's time for the results. So I believe Matthew's going to talk a bit more about this, but I just wanted to issue an important social media warning, which is be very careful what you post about your acceptances and rejections, or just what you post in general on social media. You never know who could see it, and we've all heard the horror stories, right? So don't be the subject of the next one, because, I mean, stuff happens. People get on there and they see the stuff you display they probably shouldn't have. And finally, stay calm. Remember, even if you get 5 rejections, world will not end, right? The sun will still rise tomorrow, and you'll be able to work it out. So keep it in perspective. But sometimes you aren't the recipient of an acceptance or rejection. You get slammed with musical purgatory or the wait list. Dun, 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 right? So if this does happen, don't just sit and wait around. Contact the admissions office of the school in question, as well as your prospective teacher. And I can actually speak from experience about this, because when I applied to Eastman, I was waitlisted. And I was really interested in coming here. So I got in touch with Matthew and Mr. Ying and tried to get a feel for the situation. And it dragged on for a few somewhat tense weeks, but ultimately something opened up, and here I am now. So if this does happen to you, don't give up, because it could end up working out. And don't treat it like a rejection either, because most of the really competitive schools often do put people on a wait list just because they can only take so many people, and they can't have an orchestra of 200 or something. And even if you don't get off the wait list, consider it an accomplishment, because there's a lot of people out there clutching rejections, and you're not one of them. So be proud that you got near the top. And finally, if it seems like the only way you'll get into your dream school is if all of the accepted students break their arms or something, and the University of Southern North Dakota at Hoople gave you no scholarship, PDQ Bach, he's pretty stingy, consider taking a gap year. Because while the majority of students generally go straight to undergrad after high school, or an equivalent pre-college institution, it's becoming much more common for students to take time off before grad school. And there's a lot of benefits to doing this too. You'll have more time to practice, further contemplation of career goals and options, potentially rectifying last year's missteps made during the process. Oh, this year I guess I won't schedule my pre-screening recording on November 30th. That's probably why I got that rejection from MSM. Okay. There are definitely a lot of pluses, and there's absolutely no shame in doing so. I know a lot of people who have taken time off before grad school, and they generally have no regrets. So I guess that's all for me. Good luck, everyone, and maybe you'll hear from me more in the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Zach. Really wonderful advice from someone who's been through this recently, so very valuable. Our final presenter this evening is Dr. Matthew Artizone, Associate Dean of Admissions at the Eastman School of Music. A guitarist, Matthew has performed across North America, and he has served on the faculties of Bowling Green State University, Nazareth College, and the Eastman Community Music School. So Matthew, we're really happy to have you with us, and I turn things to you.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here. Thank you all for logging in, and we'll all look forward to hearing your questions at the end. So I just wanted to cover a few more areas. The other panelists have covered quite a bit of ground already. And the first thing I was going to talk about is the importance of the resume. It's just one of the items we haven't yet hit on. And one theme that I hope you're hearing come through here is that your application to graduate school is one that will be viewed by many different people. So you have to think about the various eyes that will be assessing the various components of your application. So this goes for the resume as well. When you make a resume, it's not just for potential admission to the school. It's not just going to be read by the performance area teacher if that's your major. It's going to be read, most likely by a committee, and it may also be used by a graduate dean or a graduate office to make assistantship awards. So it's, everything that you did on your undergraduate resume applies here. We're still doing reverse chronological order. You're still listing your training. You're talking about any applied experience, which is by which I mean, things that you've done in your field, so performances and recordings and collaborative projects. And the one sort of key thing that I actually forgot to list here is your teaching experience, because many times the potential assistantships will take the form of some kind of teaching. And really, any teaching that you've done is fair game to talk about, because we're not talking about teaching music majors their private lessons, of course. We're talking in many cases about teaching secondary lessons to maybe general college students or university students, or perhaps helping with a music education methods class where you're teaching the basics of your instrument. Any of these could be possible. Any relevant work experience that you've had. I know sometimes applicants shy away from listing things that they've done, and certainly, we all get to certain stages in our careers where we can let certain jobs drop off of the resume. I no longer list that I worked at the Little Theater when I was in graduate school, as grateful as I am to them for giving me a job. But you can keep work experience on there for your graduate application, because you need to keep in mind that another form that an assistantship might take is some kind of clerical work. You might be helping out in your department's office with some filing or what have you. And then, of course, we do care about the whole person. So any community involvement that you may have in other areas of interest, you should certainly leave in there. The next area related to the application itself that I feel is key and that hasn't been addressed yet is the pre-screening process. So pre-screening for performance majors is, of course, a recording. And then if you are applying to an academic program like musicology or theory or even music education, you may have an additional writing sample that's major specific. And so sometimes those materials are screened before you get to the next stage. This might be a good time to mention the fact that with all of these requirements, you have to do a lot of research, and you have to sort of keep track of the different requirements from one school to the next. I'm a big fan of, well, maybe fan's not the right word. I use Excel a lot in my work because I have to. And it comes in really handy for this kind of thing, because you can create a list of the schools you're applying to, and you can create columns for things like pre-screening, who requires it, who doesn't, what repertoire do I have to perform for each school, and just kind of not lose track of anything that way. So the pre-screening recording, one mistake I think some applicants make is that they don't take it seriously enough. They treat it as something that just has to be good enough to get the audition. And really you want to treat it like an audition. It's a recorded audition, if you will. It's a first stage audition. And so it follows that you should create some sort of formality to the recording itself. Zach said you don't want to wake up and suddenly remember that you've got to do a third movement of something and make a recording in your pajamas in your living room. That might not come off so well. But then there's just, your playing itself. Your playing will be better if you sort of make this an event. If you schedule in a time where you're maybe going to have a friend help you with the recording, and you just formalize it a bit. Now, that said, we're not talking about going into the studio and putting lots of reverb on the sound and doing some edits. You know, we're actually specifically not looking for that. Most schools will tell you that this has to be a live recording. But if you treat it like a performance, then you know the things that are most important will come across. And of course, the things that are most important are your musicality and your potential for growth, and not perfection. That's not what any of us are looking for. Likewise with the writing samples, obviously you don't want to submit a paper that you haven't proofread, or that hasn't been, maybe you haven't gotten some feedback on. You know, it is of course ideal to use a paper that you know has succeeded for you, you know, maybe in a class context. I'll throw out one warning, because I have seen this, which is to not submit a paper that has you know, in Microsoft Word, you can edit, and you can give it to somebody to edit, and their edits show up in red. And we sometimes get papers where we can still see those edits in there and the suggestions from the professor. Don't let us see that. Make your edits and then send us the final version. You know, again, if a decision is being made based on that paper, whether or not to invite you to an interview for a program, then you need to take that step very seriously. So I think Zach covered this actually pretty well. I like the 3 to 5 number. I think the comparison with what a lot of applicants do at the undergraduate level is a good one. You know, now you're moving on to graduate school, your focus is narrowing a bit. And, you know, you really should be honing in on schools, each of which has something to offer you. You know, fallback plans are something I hear a lot about, mostly at the undergraduate level. You know, it's really my hope that at the graduate level, you've got 3 to 5 schools that whichever school you wind up attending, you know you have a lot to gain from that school. It might be the teacher, it might be a combination of a teacher and an academic program, it might be an academic major, it might be research resources, it can be any number of things, but again, I think I'm echoing the other panelists when I say, you know, focus on the factors that really matter, the content of the program that you will be enrolling in. You won't be living in this town or city forever. You know, it's now a 2-year commitment at the master's level in most cases. And you know, generally speaking, avoiding fallback plans sounds like maybe it's not good advice. You know, I'm not saying go out there without a net. I'm just saying that you want your plan to be for one of success, and that, you know, that means knowing yourself really well. It means knowing what you're ready to succeed at, and it just means that you're going to go all out for, you know, in the musical world especially. You know, you've got to kind of put yourself out there, put your best foot forward. Yeah, there's a lot that can happen. You know, we could do a whole other webinar, I think, on professional opportunities for graduates of music school, and have a lot of good stuff to talk about. But obviously it's a shifting landscape out there, and what we're seeing, and I'm sure what people are seeing with their graduates at other schools, is that our students keep being successful. You know, so worry later about what you're going to do if the music thing doesn't work out. And I'm talking to you, of course, assuming that you've already decided that this is the thing you want to do, and you're going to go for it and give it your best shot. Okay. And then here's a biggie we haven't gotten to yet. Financial aid is, you know, functions a little bit differently at the graduate level than it does at the undergraduate level. The first thing is that merit-based consideration is probably more likely a factor in more of the schools that you may be applying to. There are a lot of schools at the undergraduate level that may even be primarily need-based when it comes to financial aid. Lots of schools have different balances of need and merit aid. But at the graduate level, it sort of starts to become much more about merit. Part of this is that you all have need now, sort of by default, because you fall off of your parents' tax forms, as it were, when we consider your eligibility for student aid, which mostly takes the form of loans, of course, or for federal aid, which mostly takes the form of loans. So rest assured that you will likely qualify for really big numbers when it comes to federal loans. So your focus going into graduate school is going to be on that merit portion. So it's a good moment to reflect back to not just the resume, but the personal statement and everything else that goes into your application, and of course the audition or the interview that is probably kind of the linchpin of this, and recognize that that's your big plug for how much merit aid you might get. This bullet point, known awards versus unknown awards. So that's kind of, when you're auditioning, it seems sort of obvious that a known award would be your merit scholarship based on your audition. But an unknown will be the fact that somebody's going to recommend you to teach something even though you didn't check off a box about assistantships or you didn't interview for something specifically. Again, that's why that resume comes in so handy. You might be considered for something that you're not even asking to be considered for. So including all of that stuff in your application is important for that reason. And then understanding what your cost will be. There's a lot of information out there. There are new net price calculators at most schools that you'll apply to, and they can be more or less helpful, and probably less helpful at the graduate level than even at the undergraduate level, and I'm not even sure how helpful they are there. Because the bottom line is, and this is the fourth point, is that you won't truly know your cost at most schools until you've actually been admitted and you have an award package in front of you. You can look at the cost of tuition, and that's going to be different from one school to the next, and admittedly it's very difficult to compare cost from one school to the next based on the cost of tuition. Eastman, for example, charges graduate tuition per credit. So how much will it cost you? Well, how many classes, how many credits are you going to take? How many classes are you going to take? Do you have an assistantship? Can you be full-time at 9 credits, or do you have to be full-time at 12 credits? There are all these things that can impact what your actual bottom line cost is. And then how much scholarship are you applying towards your tuition? How much are you going to earn in a stipend for any teaching that you might do? What job opportunities might there be for you to teach? Zach mentioned he's teaching at a local music school. How many opportunities like that are there for you? I think I mentioned I was working at the Little Theater when I was a graduate student, which is kind of an art house theater down the street from Eastman. So this ties back to the school choice as well, and the number of schools you apply to. Apply to the schools you want to attend, assuming that this is a potential good match for you and you're at the right level. Don't write schools off because you don't think that you can afford them. You need to get that award letter before you really know what your cost will be. And finally, I think this is the final slide. This is a mantra that I hear myself say all the time when I'm talking to prospective students and applicants. Communicate, communicate, communicate. At every stage of the application process, this is important. We learn about students who are interested in our school because they talk to us or they talk to faculty. We track these things. I'm sure most schools do now. Our admission systems have gotten more technologically advanced. They allow us to keep track of more and more things. At Eastman, I get an email from a faculty member saying, oh, this person came for a lesson today, it went really well. That goes into a file. If that student hasn't created an application, I just created a file for that person. When they start their application, it links up with that communication. So we're going to know an awful lot about you, and that's a good thing, because one of the things we can gauge through that communication that you have with us is what your level of interest is. And all of us are looking for schools that will be a good match for us. You're looking for schools that will be a good match for you. And because we want students to wind up in the right place and to stay there for the duration of their program. So at the prospective level, communication is important. At the point that you're admitted, it's really important that you communicate with all the schools you've been admitted to. If we could all see each other, if we were in a lecture hall or something, I would at this point say, turn and look at the person sitting next to you. This is a future colleague. And trust me, any of us here on the panel and Steve, our moderator, I know would give me a hallelujah for this one. It's a small world, the music world, and you're going to run into people again. So think of your fellow applicants as your future colleagues and treat them with the professional courtesy that you would like to be treated with. And part of that is communicating your decision to all of the schools that you've been admitted to. It seems like a simple thing. Your graduate deadline for responding to schools will be April 15th. If you know on April 3rd where you want to go, you got into your first choice school, they made it work financially, it's a done deal. Don't worry about hurting anybody's feelings. This is our job. We get paid to have students call us and tell us they're not coming. It's okay. We will thank you because it will help us. Zach mentioned the wait list. It'll help us move to that wait list. It might free up scholarship money or an assistantship for somebody else who's waiting to hear from us. So that communication is critical. It can become even more critical if you are in a waitlist status or if you have to appeal your offer because you've gotten into your first choice school, but it's not looking like it's going to work financially. Give that school a chance to respond and to understand what your situation is. I mentioned at the graduate level, it can be challenging for us to understand what your actual financial situation is because again, you all look like you need financial help because you don't have a job and you're not really earning any income. So communicate about your offer, and that's what we're here for. We again want to make sure that we're getting the students that want to be here, and this I could be any school saying this. And we want to understand when you do make a decision what that decision is based on. And the last thing I'll say about that is to make sure you communicate professionally. Email is the new way of communicating. We communicate with you through email. You'll get your decisions or be notified of that you have a decision many times through email. You'll be emailing with professors, with admissions, with financial aid people. Write carefully, proofread your emails, treat them like little letters. I get emails that come from prospective students that start with the salutation, "Hey," and yeah, we live in the age of informality, and we're casual with each other, and social networking has brought us all close together in some ways. But remember that this is a professional communication. So read it carefully, write full sentences, proofread your communications, and when you call and talk to people, remember the adage that kindness gets the results. I've talked to a lot of customer service people, and I've had to make calls myself, to the phone company or what have you, and just find that if you're nice, if you listen, if you hear people out, and if you talk politely about what your needs are and what information you need, you're more likely to get a positive response than if you are sort of aggressive about it. So communicate, communicate, communicate. I will leave you with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. Really excellent way to cap off our presentation here. So we're going to turn to questions now from you all who are out there listening. And we have some questions that have been written in already, and I'm excited to get to those. And if you have a question you're thinking about, feel free to type it into the question box on your webinar control panel and send it in, and we'll see what our panelists have to say about it. So first, a couple of questions that came in from Carly here, who asks, for any master's programs, the students need to take the GRE to apply. That's sort of part one. And part two is, should pre-screening recordings be video or audio?
Do you mind if I jump in on that one, Steve?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Matthew.
This is Matthew. My first answer, and I don't want it to sound flip, is to look it up. That's what the spreadsheet is for, because the answer at each school might be different. So the GRE, generally speaking, for a Master of Music degree, a performance degree, it's not usually required. But it may be for a Master of Arts degree in an academic area like musicology or ethnomusicology or theory pedagogy or theory or what have you. But get your list of schools together and ask that question of the website of every school you're applying to. And it goes the same with the pre-screening. You know, by and large, schools will accept either or, but you know, at Eastman, for example, I can't answer that question unless I know what instrument you play, and it's different, you know, so it depends. I mean, for example, clarinetists are required to submit videos, but most other majors will accept audios for the pre-screening. So they're both good questions, but I would just be sure that you research those answers at the schools that you're actually applying to.
Let me jump in here and say that that we actually do require the GRE for our performance degree areas. All music therapy, music education, and all performance degree areas have to take the GRE, and they are only used mainly for the purpose of awarding fellowships through the graduate school. So that is the main purpose of the GRE. If it comes down to if you're on the line between being admitted and not admitted, we may look at the score, but it's pretty much handled through the graduate school beyond the School of Music. As far as video or just an audio recording, we accept either typically the voice faculty prefer to have a video recording. The other instruments are perfectly fine with audio. Again, check the website and check your specific degree program.
Wonderful, thank you both. Question here from Katria, who says that if a school says memorization is optional for a sonata or other piece of music, would you still recommend memorizing the entire audition repertoire, or will they not really have a preference? And she said that she's a cellist, hopefully applying for the MM in music education.
Okay, well, I could take that one. It's great to have a fellow cellist listening in tonight. So, I mean, what I would say is you should definitely try and memorize it. Just because when you memorize something, not only does that demonstrate that you've really spent a lot of time with it and prepared it, but it also helps you in the performance as well, I feel, in my experience, because you know, there's a very big difference that can be perceived between, you know, when someone's just, you know, reading, and then if they're able to really focus on, you know, their technique and loosening up and being relaxed. And, you know, personally for me in audition settings, I've actually felt more comfortable during the memorized works. You know, I mean, obviously, I made sure I had it well committed to memory, otherwise I might not be as comfortable. But just purely for that purpose, that I can really focus on other things and being able to, you know, focus on the things that I want to make sure I'm really demonstrating. So that would be certainly the way to go. I think for that.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Actually, speaking of blogs, there is a blog about this on the Eastman admissions site that I wrote, because I've done workshops on how to memorize. But the other question is, should I memorize? And you know, I think the bottom line is that you need to present as musical a performance as you can. And if that means using the music, then, you know, in most cases, if they've said it's optional, I don't think they can or should hold it against you if you do use the music. But, you know, I would echo everything that Zach said and agree that it's, you know, through the process of learning your music well, you probably will memorize it. But if not, don't do it just to see, just to impress the committee and kind of see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, you should certainly do what you're comfortable with. But if you can be comfortable doing by memory, I think that would certainly be the way to go.
Excellent. Our next question, I'm going to sort of combine two questions that have been asked because they're very similar. And the question is really about personal statements and resumes. And I know, Jennifer, you mentioned this, but one part of the question is who reads those? And then the other half of the question is how much do they influence the decision-making process?
Well, I can say that in my experience, everyone reads them. I read them first. They come to me first, and then I send it out to, we have a committee that includes the applied area instructors, and typically, let's say you're applying in trumpet, everybody within the brass division would read that personal statement. And the other question was, who reads it and how, and say the other part of the question?
How much will they influence the decision making for a particular student?
Well, I would think that that depends on the university, but I can say that most of the directors that I am in contact with, we put a lot of emphasis on it because it shows us how you are. Like I said in the talk, how it humanizes your application. We want to know who you are as a person. We're not just looking for the greatest pianist or the greatest composer. We're looking for the whole musician, the whole person. And that personal statement shows us you're more than just a list of attributes on your CV. So we put a lot of stock in that, especially when it comes down to assistantships and where we think you're going to fit the best. We take your CV and that personal statement. I have hired people to work in our tutoring lab just based on their personal statement and how they feel about teaching.
Could I just
Great,
add
thank you,
something to that?
Catherine. Oh, sure, Matthew, go ahead.
I mean, I agree completely with everything Jennifer's saying, and I would just add that, you know, the thing you also have to keep in mind is that while for especially performance majors, it may seem that the audition is the most important thing. You know, we do get to this point where we have to draw a line, and I always use the example of kazoos, so I don't stress out any particular instrumentalists. But you know, say we have 4 kazoo spots for next fall. And the kazoo faculty members come back and say, well, there are these 10 that we really loved and we want to admit them all. And then it's my job to remind them that they only have 4 spots. And then we have to decide which 4 are going to get in. And yeah, based on our previous yields, we might actually wind up admitting 6 of them because we know we usually get that percentage of our admitted students or what have you. But then maybe, you know, 1 or 2 more go on the wait list and a couple more aren't going to get in. So that's when all of the other components of the application become really critical in deciding, you know, where are we going to draw that line and what are the differences between these applicants.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. A question, really good question here from Barbara, who says, I've heard that schools prefer that students get experience in their field before applying to graduate school. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I would say it certainly depends on your personal situation, I suppose, and what aspect of the field you're going into. But in my experience, it's definitely not something that I think is quote-unquote preferred. Because, I mean, for me, I went straight from undergrad to grad school. And I have several colleagues here who did the same thing. Because, I mean, basically for admissions, I mean, the only real, I think, requirement or standard is that you've reached a level equivalent to of having had a bachelor's degree from the school in question that you're applying to for grad school. And, you know, so it's, I mean, well, like, again, taking time off can certainly be beneficial. I certainly wouldn't assume or have the idea that it's something that's expected because, you know, it's just all about, you know, where you are and what you want to accomplish at the school.
I'll jump in here really quick. For our music education degrees, I would say that is definitely true. We would like for you to go out and get, I've heard different numbers between 3 to 5 years experience in the public school before coming back and getting a graduate degree in music education. As far as the other major disciplines of study, including performance or any of the academic areas, I don't think that's necessarily the case. Maybe music therapy, but not so much in performance and in theory musicology.
Yeah. Bear in mind, I'm speaking sort of from my performance perspective because that's sort of what people I interact with the most. But yeah, I mean, it like I was saying before, it certainly does depend on your specific program and, you know, at the specific school too, oftentimes.
Great. Another question here we have is from David, and David says, what are some of the ways of getting in touch with current students at a program?
Oh, well, what I did when I was applying to Eastman, well, I guess this is somewhat outside of the performance program, but I was interested in the arts leadership program, and I was in touch with the directors of that, and they actually put me in touch subsequently with one of the students who is currently in it, because it's a very unique certificate program that is based out of the Institute for Music Leadership here at Eastman, which incidentally also houses Polyphonic. And so that was very useful for me. But I mean, I sort of went through the directors of that. And when you visit the school too, that can also be really helpful, you know, because oftentimes the current student will be giving the tour or something like that. And also Facebook too can, I think, be a very good resource. You know, there's groups for prospective students oftentimes you can search out. And also a really great website is collegeconfidential.com. And they have a whole section and a whole forum devoted exclusively to music majors. And I practically lived on that site for both times I was applying for undergrad and grad school, because people post questions there all the time about certain schools and certain maybe even certain teachers, just all aspects of the process. And there's a lot of students on that site that were once prospective students, and now they're currently going to school at a conservatory university, and they're always very eager and willing to answer questions. So I would certainly investigate those sorts of resources.
Yeah, I would just pick up on that and echo that, you know, visiting a school is obviously the best way to come into contact with anybody at the school, the faculty, the students, and it's a very important step, because when the springtime comes and you're going to make a decision, if you haven't been to a place and you haven't interacted with the people in it, it can be very hard to make a clear decision about what the best place for you is. So, and you know, if you call an admissions office, you could very well wind up getting a student worker on the phone. You know, that might be a starting point, is to just contact the admissions office at the schools in question. Social networking is great. I have a little bit of an issue with College Confidential. You just have to be careful that you're not trying to get information about requirements from people who don't work for the schools. You don't.
Oh, yeah, that's a very
you don't
good
want
point.
Sally's dad telling you what the pre-screening requirements are for, you know, a specific school. So still rely on the school websites for that kind of information.
Right. Yeah. No. That's definitely true. That's more of a place, I think, to get more information about you know, personal experiences and just more of like an inside scoop. Whereas, you know, you certainly got to trust the main website of wherever you're applying for the concrete info. So.
Great. Well, I've got, I think, a good question for us to wrap up with tonight that I think all three of our panelists might have some advice for. And we've talked a lot about the process for applying to graduate school and things to consider. And we've mentioned the idea of a gap year if you're planning to take time off before applying. And so it might be useful just to talk for another minute about that. And so we have a question here that says, do you have any specific advice for someone planning on taking a gap year?
My advice would be, I guess, pretty general. But you know, when you take time off, I think the biggest question that the school that you subsequently attend will have is, so what have you been doing? You know, so if your time off is to study or to gain some experience that you know, has some sort of direct and clear influence on what your life's path is, documenting that and writing about it, you know, in a clear and compelling manner can really enhance your application. So I think, you know, choosing something that helps move you along your path, which is a very general thing to say, but that's because, you know, it will be, you know, it could be studying with a certain teacher in Germany. It could be attending an institute. You know, it really depends on what path you're on. But if it's an experience that you could not have otherwise, and that you will then start graduate school, you know, with a deeper background and experience than you would otherwise have, then I think that's a good indicator that you've made a good choice for your gap year.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I have a lot of friends who definitely, you know, they took you know, 1, 2, even more years off before going ahead and getting a subsequent degree, and they were being professionals. They were performing. They were teaching, or I mean, depending on you know what their specific focus was, they were getting involved and they were getting that real world experience. So I mean, unless, you know, and some people take time off because they're contemplating, you know, going in a different direction. Perhaps they're going in a different field. So that would obviously be a different type of situation. But if, you know, you are thinking of taking some time before going ahead and getting another degree, and you're certainly planning to stay on the same path, then go out there and get dirty with it, you know, and get involved, you know, and don't just work at the local Starbucks, you know. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, try and be a professional, and you know, in some ways that can be almost more invaluable than being in school. I mean, for me personally, I am not applying for another degree after this year. This is my last year, and I might go and get another degree in the future. I'm not sure, but what I'm planning to do is to start, you know, getting involved in the areas of the field I'm interested in and I'm passionate about, and that might end up being a quote-unquote gap year. It might just end up being beginning of real career. I don't know, but just don't be afraid to jump in and get that experience.
And I'll just end by saying, you know, use that time to better yourself as a musician. I wrote down 4 things when I was sitting here thinking about this: to use that time to read, and use that time to practice, use that time to write, whether that be in research or just journaling your own thoughts on your instrument and your performance, and then actually get out there and perform any opportunity that you can. Make sure you include your reasoning for taking this gap year. Make sure you include it in your personal statement, because it could be you know, something that really sets you apart from other people. Use the time to publish, write a small article, go out and travel to master classes and to conferences and workshops and any place you can go in order to make connections and in order, again, to better yourself as a musician and to prepare yourself to start the degree.
Excellent. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for tuning in tonight, and certainly thank our 3 very knowledgeable presenters, Matthew Arizone, Jennifer Snodgrass, and Zachary Purcell. Thank you for sharing your insights and perspectives with us tonight. Very valuable information, and I know that people really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. And I want to remind folks that we have another webinar coming up in November on the topic of freelancing, visiting a new city, moving to a new city, expanding your potential freelance opportunities. So if that's something that interests you, we certainly hope you'll join us. And this webinar is being recorded, so if you want to go back and review it, see part of it again, it'll be posted on polyphonic.org in a few days. So thank you again to our presenters, and we will see you next time.
Right.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good night. Thank you.